Good afternoon, my name is Mary Maslowski. I'd like to call the meeting of the Historic District and Historical Commission to order. Today is Friday, October 26, 2018. It's 4 p.m. and we are currently holding the meeting at 732 Main Street in the Griffin Room. As required by law, the town is notifying you that we may audio and video record this meeting. Any person intending to either audio or video record this meeting is required to inform the chair at this time. Hearing none, I'd like to start with a roll call, please.
Gail Carroll.
Bob Doan.
Jean Steiner.
Bob Bradley.
Julia Eldridge.
Brendan Lowney.
And first things first, we're welcoming Brendan to his first Historic Commission meeting as our new member. We are going to take things out of order. We've had a request to open the public hearing for HH 2018-20. It's a notice of intent which has been received for 78 Bank Street, map 14, parcel WA in the C-V and R-M zones. The application proposes a partial demolition of numerous side porch additions and not original to this circa 1800 home. The application is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40C, Section 6, and the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 2, Angelo
Kyriakides.
Right. Trustee as owner and applicant. So, we'll let you open by telling us what you need.
Good afternoon. My name is Angelo Kyriakides, and I reside at 78 Bank Street. The house was built somewhere. It's unclear as to when it was built, but I think it wound up in this location about 1823. The house is originally a half cape, and it sits facing Main Street. The back side that I've shadowed, that I've highlighted on sheet SP1, is a series of porches that were built over the years by various owners and enclosed, and another porch was built, and then that was enclosed, and another porch was built, and so it's a series of 4 porches. It has a cinder block foundation. It's not original to the original foundation that is under the main house. And I want to take this part down because it's deteriorated. There's no frost walls. There's sort of a brick patio that's been enclosed, and I want to build an addition on it at some point. But I need to get rid of these components right now and bring the house back to what it was, which is reflected on the sheet A6. Which shows the back elevation with adding a window and a door in that elevation, and extending the existing half dormer that's there once the roof is removed to be a full dormer. The original dormer is not original to the house. They were put on in about 1914, 1911, I think. When I was doing the roof over a number of years ago, the carpenters were kind enough to write their names and dates on the roof framing. So the dormers are original 1914. They're still over 100 years old. And I would like to just expand the dormer on the backside or on this elevation, the north elevation, so that I can have the headroom inside, because that's where the bathroom is.
Okay, any questions from members of the board? We are here for a notice of intent, so we are strictly determining whether or not the applicant can do the demolition requested, namely the 4 porches, because the house is built prior to 100 years old. So, any questions from members of the board?
I don't know if this is pertinent, but you had said you will come back, I assume, for rebuilding the foundation.
Yes, when I do the addition, I'll come back.
Okay.
Absolutely. I've shown what the footprint of the addition is, but I haven't really designed the addition yet.
When you do that, are you thinking of facing the house more towards?
No, I'm not going to move the house at all.
Leave it as is?
Yeah, it was intended to face Main Street, and I think that's the interesting part about it, that it faces Main Street.
Sure.
I like that feature of it.
Any other questions from the board?
Yes, could you, again, kind of step through the drawings, because
Sure.
What is being demolished?
Sure. On sheet A1, it's the first floor plan, and it shows there's a series of porches in there. I probably should have highlighted each individual porch, but there's a chimney that was added on the backside when they added a heating system.
Yeah.
They tapped into that they built that chimney on the outside of the building,
Right.
and the porch was from that chimney to Bank Street.
Right.
There's a small porch there, and then They then closed that porch in and added a porch to the side where the fireplace is.
Yeah.
Then when they enclosed that porch, they went to the west side, again, the back side, and they enclosed where the fireplace is. So there's 3 porches, and the one that's out there now is just a slab with brick on it. It's not even a foundation.
Right.
The sheet A2 reflects the second floor, which is a mirror image of the first floor.
Exactly.
That's affected. And then there's the roof plan. Again, I'm not touching the main house, other
Right.
than when I take the roof off of the valleys that tie into the main roof, I'll have a hole in the roof, and I just want to close it with continuing the dormer that's consistent with what the front of the house looks like now.
Right.
So sheet sheet A6, all the other highlighted sections are the building that'll come down. You can see on sheet A5, the
Right.
dormer extends into the existing house. And sheet A6 reflects what the elevations will all look like once I take that demolition down.
Wow.
I have not done the addition at this point. I will come back
Gotcha.
before the board
Okay.
at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
And then the photographs clearly show you it's just not consistent with anything historical.
Right.
Chair,
Any addition, Mr. Bradley?
the dormers, I can't recall it, I'm sorry, but are the dormers this way now?
Yes.
On the existing, the original house?
Yes, on the original house, there are two dormers across the front, the south elevation and the north elevation.
Yeah. And
Just that the north elevation is abbreviated by the valley of the intersecting roof of when they built that second floor porch, second floor room above the porches.
Mm-hmm. What I wanted to take now.
So if I may, you're cutting into those original dormers only to remove the connection to the
Yeah,
porch that's getting demolished.
Once I remove the ridge and the
You're gonna
valley, there'll be a
close it back
hole
up.
there, and I want to
You're gonna
close it
close
by
it back up.
extending the dormer another 8 feet,
Mhm.
so it'll match the front dormer.
Any further questions for members of the board? So we are in a public hearing. Are there any questions from the public? Hearing none. Any other questions before we move to close the public hearing? So the chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
The motion is made
Second.
by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mrs. Steiner. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, it is unanimous. Okay, so we are, as I mentioned earlier, we are here for a notice of intent on the demolition. So the chair would entertain a motion. I guess let me start for the benefit of Mr. Lowney. We can, a yes vote would allow the demolition as described in the application. It's strictly demolishing the existing porches that are highlighted and closing in, extending and closing in that dormer that's opened. We can do that. We can, if we deny it, our denial is the imposition of a demolition delay, and that's all our denial actually is. So the chair would entertain a motion
I so move
to,
to approve the demolition request for HH 2018-20 for notice of intent for 78 Bank Street to approve the partial demolition of the numerous side porches and the additions that are not original to the 1800 home as proposed in the application.
all right. We have a motion made by Mrs. Starner. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have 3.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Welcome, thank you, Angelo. All right, we're back to the beginning of our agenda here. We will reopen the public hearing for H2018-09. It's the certificate of appropriateness, which was received for 711 Main Street, map 41, parcel D8, in the C-V zone, and the Harwich Center Historic District. The application proposes to demolish the circa 1970 gasoline station shed and construct a two-story mixed-use commercial structure that includes 2 dwelling units. The application is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40C, Section 6, and the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 2. Ellie Basil, trustees et al. Owner is Samil Patel. Applicant. Please come on up, folks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Recusing yourself.
Members of the committee, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for indulging us on a Friday afternoon.
Right. For the record, I'm Howard Cahoon. I represent the petitioner, Samil Patel, who's with me today. Unfortunately, our architect could not be with us due to a previous commitment. However, we had a lovely meeting, or a significant meeting with him the other day, and hopefully the plan that's before you answers your questions. We've also provided so-called cut sheets on many of the materials, but we certainly would like to try to answer any concerns or questions that you might have.
Just for clarification for you folks and for those in the audience, this is a continuation of the original public hearing. So there are 4 of us that are able to vote on this matter. It's Mrs. Carroll, Mr. Doan, myself, and Mrs. Steiner. Anyone can ask questions, however, the 4 of us are the ones that are currently active voters on the matter. So, members of the board, does anybody have any questions about the current set of plans that we have? And I am looking at a set of plans that are dated. I don't see a date on them.
I don't think we had the most
Is it-
current at the
Is it the
last.
10/9/2018?
I believe so, 10:09.
Yep. That is the set. Thank you. So that's the most recent set
Correct.
that we have.
And where's this one?
I know. I don't know where it went. I thought I had it, unless it's this one. Oh, this might be it.
Oh, there's a lot of pages.
Got some in it.
So let's walk through the new plans, I guess, before we get some questions. Could you highlight for us kind of what's changed from the last round?
You know, we've.
I know we hadn't seen side elevations. We had seen front, and I don't know that we had seen a completed back elevation either, so.
I think we've described in more detail the landscape, that it'll be grass, the lighting, the bushes. I think the parking lot is clearer. And I think the rear elevation is here also. This is my last page, I believe.
That's the front.
Yeah.
See, we're right here.
Oh, there's the back.
Page 7.
This is the
Oh, okay, yeah.
right
This
side.
is Main
And
Street.
this is the back.
Correct.
It says it.
Oh, and it looks like you have, I thought I had seen this. You had given us proposed layouts. Now, for members of the board, in looking at the certificate of appropriateness, our purview is really how everything looks from public streets and public ways. I appreciate the floor plan, though, because it does kind of give us some perspective on what's behind the walls on the other side. So, for folks to keep in mind when we're asking questions. looking at the proposed left, I've got the left side of the Main Street elevations. So left side is going to be our, actually west elevation. It's gonna be our east.
East, yeah.
So looking at it from the front of the building, that's all I'm trying to. Sorry, Jamie.
And this is the older one, right? This is the old,
So this is the Main Street entrance.
You know, I'm
Yeah.
trying
Oh,
to
I
see what the,
sure, yeah. Yeah, you see the windows changed.
right.
Is that correct?
So,
Yeah.
Feel free.
May I ask?
Yes.
In looking at the detailed drawing of the front that faces Main Street, and then looking at this layout here, it looks like the front of the building has a jut out. I thought it was all going to be kind of flush.
There's something of a little entranceway, an overhang of a portico of sorts. Where's that from?
Yes, I thought that we had discussed having it flush across the front to kind of fit the feel of the other buildings in the streetscape.
Well, I'm not sure there's any specific reason that we have that. Again, I thought it was sort of a little in conjunction with the, this is sort of view. I guess only in terms of the pillars and a little bump out.
No, I think I remember one discussion was to give it a little more 3D effect of shadows. That would, I think that was the discussion, and so that's why we
It's
did
bumped
ask for
out.
the bump out.
Okay. I didn't remember that.
and it's enclosed,
Yes.
as
Yes.
opposed to, I think at one point we had seen some with just pillars.
Earlier than that.
And the concrete sidewalk looks like it has a stamping design, so
Yes.
that's
Yes.
nice, yes.
The brick design.
That's nice.
The, noticed on the front facing Main Street, the left window is a fake window now, or faux window.
No,
It says it on the
oh,
plan.
it does, I'm sorry. I
And
wish the architect was here.
I mean, that should be a see-through window into the,
Yeah.
into the building.
You could go in there.
It is a real window.
So what's on the other side of that window?
The counter, I think, is on the other side. This way the counter is, right? And behind the counter, usually there's things on the wall, lottery tickets, so forth.
So if you're standing on the sidewalk and looking in, what would you see through that window?
Nothing.
You'd see the back of the display case. It's kind of like what there is now
Right.
behind. And the same with the second floor dormers too, above it.
Up top,
There-
there's nothing in that section, correct?
But there'd be no reason why not just to have that, to see into that open space, right?
Correct.
That's not like a cathedral ceiling or anything in the down
No.
part of the store.
No,
What is that space used for? Because it's not part of the apartments.
I think it's just empty.
Storage,
I don't think,
anything?
we're not having any storage on the
No, we're
second
not
floor.
having
No.
storage.
I would think it'd still be proper to have windows you can see through. I don't know what it would look like if, when you say faux
Well,
windows.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. A faux window, I mean, I'm thinking it's not going to be a transparent glass. What would
Right.
it?
Oh, it'll be a real window. It's just that behind the window, there'll be nothing, there'll be almost a wall, 2 or 3 feet behind the window, I guess. I mean, you could put a window box in there, you could put something inside.
I think
Except
that kind of
that-
defeats the purpose.
I don't understand what a
You
faux
know, I
window
think,
is.
I think part of the,
Yeah.
of the whole ambience of a streetscape on a main street in a historic town is that there is life that you watch as you walk down the street, and you want to look in and see people shopping, or people handing out the tickets. Could the counter be moved?
Where's the counter? Show me the counter. Well, certainly, we could do something. I think there's enough room on either side of the window to put lottery tickets, cigarettes,
Yeah,
stuff like that.
better.
Yeah, out the window.
And you'd look in and you'd see the back of someone manning the cash register and the
Right.
people doing business, and
Right.
if that's
Yeah.
important, we'd do that,
That's
I
wouldn't we?
think that's, I think
With
that's,
the people, we're ringing up the customers and they can see the cash happening from the window.
From a safety aspect.
Yeah.
Robbery, well, they know there's cash in there, whether they see it or not. I mean, if it's important, I think we need to do it. Otherwise, as you say, Bob, it's what you said. I was surprised myself. I didn't realize that the windows at where we are now, the location we are at now, were fake. I had never really noticed them. But you're right, there's just windows, but there's nothing behind them. It's like a,
It used to be open.
did it used to be open?
I think too, at our prior meetings, they hadn't really figured out what their floor plan was as well.
That's
so,
true.
Yes.
Because that was one of our discussions
We were
a few meetings
losing
ago.
Space.
I don't think this kills it.
Now, I have a question, I may be out of, out of order, and out of,
Go ahead.
maybe jumping ahead of myself is probably a better phrase to say. Do you, with the current plans in front of us, do you know what waivers you're gonna be seeking from other boards and commissions, planning and otherwise?
Well, I think that my understanding of the height restrictions is 30 feet, and I believe our cupola goes to 34. And I would hope that the planning board would grant that variance. I don't think there's any other, I think we meet parking requirements. I think we meet the space coverage requirements, which is 80%. I'm not sure that we have any other, well, I think we need a setback a waiver from the setback from the street.
Street, yeah.
So I don't think there's anything that's unattainable. I mean, these are things that this commission has really wanted, and we've tried to comply, so that I would hope they'd go along with that. I mean, that's the whole idea.
I just wanna keep that in mind as we're looking forward. Additional questions from the board? Looks like we've gone back to the prior windows on the front
Yes,
with the additional details.
yes.
And that's what Mr.
Yes.
Dolan,
And it looks like we've added some dormers to the left side elevation and added all the dormers being there last time, but
I mean, I think the dormers in the front, they break up the building and add some dimension.
any other questions on this sheet?
On are we still on the
We're
front
still in the
side?
front and the left.
I think, I want to get into some detail, but it's later, I think, on one of the later plans.
Okay.
Building details, yeah, that's on the lighting and
Okay.
stuff.
Anybody else with questions about the first sheet?
No.
None, okay. Let's move on to the next sheet. We have the right side elevation and we have the proposed rear elevation. Again, here it looks to me like we've added some dormers to the back. I'm looking at the proposed right side elevation.
Yes,
Is that door that I'm looking at, is that for the living space upstairs?
yes. And of course, those dormers are where the living space is located.
Yeah.
And they're real dormers.
That door, I know it's at the bottom of a stairway. Can that be moved in at all? It looks awkward being right at the corner of the building.
You want to see it?
Yeah, we have,
You have to have egress and you have to in and out.
we need to have two of them, so
Yes.
Yes.
And the same goes for the back elevation.
All right.
Again, right on the corner, it's not architecturally pleasing. And I know your original plan had it in on the west, the right side, what you call the right side elevation, the door was in. But I didn't know whether that, with that stairway that looked like your landing is really big, whether you can shorten that up to make the stairway end
You know,
shorter.
there could be some architectural reason that
Yeah.
I'm not aware of, but certainly if need be, I think that it would just have to be another angle or something, so that the entrance would be a little further from the corner, and then you'd walk in to go up the side. I don't know. It doesn't look,
Is that more of the egress, emergency door? Would they be typically going in the back door?
So we have a layout for the.
Apartments?
Yeah, the apartments, and so we are required to have like two exits and entries.
Absolutely.
So the architect designed it like this, so, you know, we don't know if we tell him, he can probably move things around and fix it.
Mhm.
So if we could ask him that question, is that a consensus with
Yes,
the four of us?
yes.
Like to see if those doors can be moved a little bit?
of course, I suppose what it does affect is, there is first floor, is commercial space with,
Ah.
with things and so forth, and it would cut back a little on those, but
Yeah, I'm not talking a lot of feet,
no.
just so it's not right on the
good
corner.
point. I would think it could be done, no problem.
Any other questions on this sheet? So we're good on the right side elevation, and any other questions on the proposed rear elevation? So I see, we want to go towards the inside. Let's look at the first,
What page you on down there?
I have 4 of 7 in front of me. Any questions on 4 of 7?
That's just the
I
interior.
think it's just the interior.
Yeah.
And there isn't too much that we would be addressing on that.
That's that door on the side, and that's the door there.
All right, yeah.
Main Street is here.
This is the
Um,
front, right?
If I may,
Right here.
Yes,
Main Street, if looking at 4 of 7, Main Street is the right-hand side, correct?
It must-
Main Street is,
This is the main street.
Because
Oh, my
here's
right
the
hand
cash
is-
counter.
yeah.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
where his cash
Okay.
counter, and those will be those windows that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Gail or Bob, any questions on this?
No, other than again, the faux windows.
Okay. 5 of 7, we have the units upstairs. Again, I'm not sure that there's anything, really with the exception of the staircases, which may be affecting an egress door.
Yeah, good.
You couldn't, there's not enough room there to put a third apartment unit?
Well,
It's just blank.
if you have another unit, you have more parking, you have more septic, it may not, but I don't know.
I think you'd want to maximize your income as much as possible.
yeah, well, architecturally, the architect was saying the lot cannot handle having one more, because the septic has to be bigger, and then we don't have enough room to, you know,
Oh,
put it all there.
okay.
Okay. back to some of the landscaping plans. Let's look at sheet 1 of 7, we have the outside. Main Street at the top of the plan. Shows us a parking, you said you believe the parking is compliant?
Yes,
Now, the back border, is that actually the land?
the dotted line is the boundary.
And so you're actually going to end up filling up that, basically that whole lot then?
It'll be filled.
Yeah.
There may be a gradual slope also, Bob,
Yeah, okay,
to some degree.
right. And I notice you have the light post here. Are those fully compliant with the light spread, or do you know?
I hope so.
In other words,
I believe so. In other words.
because it's pretty strict now on
Yes.
that you can't go, I'm thinking mainly because of the neighbors, those lights are right in their yard practically. And do you envision, you know, it was new to us last time, you said you were maintaining the liquor store in its current location
Correct.
and not moving that over here. Are you anticipating traffic between the two if someone,
Well, they'll have separate entrances.
no, but I mean foot traffic, so someone parks in
I-
one parking lot and says, oh, I want to get some liquor, will they be walking over this embankment? And how would you prevent that walking, because that'll destroy the embankment? And
If-
that's
if-
not the same level either, because it will slope off a
I think
bit.
that we'd have to provide some stairs or something, and we don't have any plans to do that. We plan to have the liquor store exactly where it is now.
Yeah, I don't have, that's not the issue. The issue is that over long-term, that's gonna become I think it's gonna become a walking path. There's not a fence or anything there.
As you know,
stopping.
as you know, it steps up pretty steeply.
Right.
And I mean, if had to be, it would have to come in with a fence of sorts or something. I don't think we'd want to encourage that.
No, I mean, you can walk around the sidewalk, you know, go out front.
Exactly.
But I just anticipate that's gonna be a problem.
As you say, to break everything down.
Okay, any other questions on the plan itself?
I don't think we have to get involved in the catch basins, because I don't think they're really visible. I don't see them on the plan, but I assume somewhere along the line, you have to lay out the catch basin somewhere. Again, in case of runoff, I don't know how you're gonna manage that.
We have
because-
drainage, we'll have to have drainage plans, and they'll have to comply with the town's requirements.
Right,
That's all gonna be before planning board.
is it? Okay.
So looking at sheet 1, let's move on to sheet 2. We've got some landscaping. Again, we have Main Street in the front, at the top of the plan. It's looking like stamped concrete. Looking to this detail packet that we received. Is this what you're
Yeah,
proposing?
that's what
something
we're
similar?
Where did that come
trying
from?
to,
So did you not
We-
have this, it should be this packet, should be in your,
This was handed in
Oh, it's right
after.
here.
this? Do you have it? Or maybe
He
not.
does have it, I'm sorry.
No.
No, so it looks like everyone didn't get it, so let me, let's take a minute, we'll pass this around, for you folks to take a quick look.
Was that laid out today?
No, we handed it in the other day after the last meeting.
yeah, after the last
It
one.
wasn't, I just picked up my package today because I've been out of town and it wasn't with me.
Not there.
So apologies to members of the board, it looks like that didn't get copied and put into the packets, so we'll just take a minute and let people look at it.
That's fine.
Mary, could I see the inside? Just a minute.
Those are the
The
windows?
windows, yeah. Oh, the ones that-
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Okay. That's the shingle.
Yeah, that'll look nice.
Mhm.
And let's see what happens. I think we got that.
That looks like good over there.
Oh, wait a minute.
You know what? There's
There's lots of copies.
lots of copies, all in one pack.
That explains it.
Thank you. And these two, I guess, all of the Anderson
Let's
things
see,
that
the
meant
other-
nothing to us.
A couple short.
These don't look like extra
No,
copies. They're all
these
different.
aren't either.
Because I
Just-
This
It's
is
a
the
lot.
color. Oh, there's the light.
Oh, I can't do anything.
Texture.
I know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it looks like just this.
Yeah. Good. Just those are the light fixtures. That's interesting. Well, these are the light fixtures. I don't know if those will be. Does the planning board look at the light fixtures? To see if they're compliant with the current lighting plan?
They would have to be compliant with a lighting plan. The
'Cause that's
design
been-
would come to us because it's a historic district.
Okay.
So this
Well-
is what it looks like put together.
I think so.
Well, that's if a double pole. I
Yeah.
don't think there's any double
Right.
poles. Yeah. Yeah, I was, yeah.
Pass this one.
How is this going to be maintained how is it going to be watered? Landscaping, green. You have, it's now grass and bushes and trees.
Well, we don't have an irrigation system planned for it, but it,
How will that be irrigated in the summer then to keep it looking decent?
The sprinkle system.
would have a sprinkler system of sorts.
Used to have sprinkler system.
Is what you said,
And this is,
underground?
yeah, comes from,
So you're saying you have to add a sprinkler system into this?
yes.
Any other questions on this portion, which is the landscape plan? Gail?
As you come down the east side, is this all grass? I guess it is, I see it
Yep.
down here now, okay, right. Good. And this side, the east side also has a covered walkway?
I don't think any is covered. The east
No, no.
side, what do you mean, where the door is?
Main Street,
Main
No.
Street, and then.
talking the
I thought it was
parking lot
down
side.
Parking lot side, I thought I saw something.
So
else.
this is the building.
Yeah,
This is the parking space.
just checking.
I thought I saw
Like right
something
here.
that said
That's-
covered
We don't have anything
walkway.
here.
I think that's a good. So that's covered,
Is covered?
yeah. It's covered, wherever you see the columns, it's
It's on the
covered.
front there, okay. Yeah, I guess it would be covered.
On, you know what, it's on 1 of 7 on the first
And
sheet.
this is not covered, this backside and right side elevation and the back revert.
Yeah,
Yeah, this does show that
Yeah,
there's a
there's a
5-foot
cover.
overhang
Is over here.
covered sidewalk.
Yeah.
for covered sidewalk. Is that,
Yeah,
Goes
So
up
that's on the parking side,
Side,
right?
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
all along the side of the building.
All along the side.
okay.
Right here.
yes, yes.
Any other questions on that sheet? All right, before we go further, I just want to, we talked about the brick. I just wanted to mention the shingles. Are we talking painted cedar shakes or those vinyl shingles?
Go ahead.
So they're gonna be wood shingles.
They're gonna be what?
Oh,
Architectural shingles?
the wood, sorry.
No, not wood. We're asking,
Yeah, siding.
Okay,
No, but you're talking about the shingles, right?
correct.
On the roof.
No, I'm talking I'm
That's
talking
also
the,
siding.
Or the
The
siding from the
shingles.
clapboard.
Yeah. Let's see right here. White wood, clapboard siding.
Clear, white, wood, clapboard siding.
Color is
the clapboards are different than shingles, right?
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Clapboards are different than shingles.
In color, or?
No, just a
Well,
clapboard
yeah,
is a
yeah,
clapboard and
yeah.
shingles are
Oh,
shingles.
absolutely, a
So
clapboard.
I'm just trying to
Yes.
figure
No,
out
no, no, yeah,
what we're talking about and
clapboard.
where we're talking about.
With clapboard on the side and with shingles on the roof.
Which one are we looking for?
Yeah, like the
These
picture.
aren't roof shingles.
No. So what happened is, we were gonna
Clapboard.
Yeah.
do that, and then we changed it on the plan, but the picture is,
Okay, so
showing
you
the
changed
shingle.
it to
The clapboard siding.
the white clapboard siding.
And then there's a color gray seal, 222.
So this is for the color of the paint
Yes, yes.
on them.
Yeah, it's all clapboard.
All right,
Okay.
that's all I wanted to clarify. Where is she? Yeah, all right. Okay, any other questions on that sheet? On sheet 2? None. Sheet 3, we have some detail on fixtures.
Can you explain the gutters? Because it's, it talks about copper or metal lined gutter, but then it's wood gutter box.
Well,
I'm not sure what the view is from the street.
I think the view from the street is wood. I think the inside is the copper or metal, so that wood doesn't deteriorate overnight.
Okay.
They're not open at the corners.
Right.
Could we have a picture, perhaps, if you could get one?
Of a gutter or a drawing?
Yeah, if you want to see what the detail is inside.
Yeah, not
That would be my
inside, I
question.
just wanted to see what it looked on the outside, and whether it's the wood finish. I think I understand now, it's
Okay.
just the wood.
Yeah, wood molding, period.
And do you have the downspout somewhere? I don't see what you're using for downspouts.
Downspout is not there.
I don't think we have the downspout shown.
We need that.
So that would obviously be wood encased, whatever it was.
I don't know. I mean, you could have a round gutter possibly.
But it would have to be wood clad.
No, not necessarily. I don't think they always were wood clad. Bob, would you know, would old gutters always be wood clad?
Wood clad?
Yeah, not the gutters, the downspouts. Or would they be metal?
They're metal, I think.
But they weren't aluminum at the time.
I think, yeah, but no.
Bob, could you,
You
Bob,
should have a detail of it on the drawing.
Yeah.
Bob,
no,
can
we
I
don't.
just ask you to go to the,
That's okay.
so just for the record, Mr. Bradley was asked a question. Sorry, Bob.
All right, what do you want to know?
No, the downspouts, whether they were necessarily always wood or whether they'd be metal, which
Historically,
Well, historically, they would be wood, because they didn't have the methods to do metal work.
okay.
But there are products out there, that's why I said you should probably ask for the detail.
Right.
Because there are products out there that are, well, in my opinion, would be acceptable.
Right,
It's just a question of supplying
right.
the cut and the
But-
detail.
The modern standard white aluminum square things, really aren't appropriate, are they?
No, there's also stuff out there that's pretty bad, you know.
Yeah.
So that's, you gotta see the detail, that's all.
Okay.
Maybe eventually the commission should specify the kind of downspout that they would,
Right,
so that this wouldn't have to be presented all the time.
right.
I think that we
Thanks, Bob. So can we add a downspout
Yes.
detail to the plan, please?
And I guess I'm not
Oh.
clear exactly what it is that you'd like.
That's right in our historic
our guidelines.
guidelines. We talk about gutters and downspouts.
Okay.
Wooden or copper gutters and downspouts, basically.
Wooden,
Yeah,
Wooden or
Okay.
copper.
so we'd put copper inside and cover it,
right.
that's all. Okay,
Yeah, I'd just double check with our,
Yep.
that is in the architectural. Thank you for having that.
You're welcome.
And the posts, the column details, I think, I see a lot of reference to using oak, but I assume they're clad in oak too. It doesn't, it talks about oak plywood. I don't know if that's the outer clad or not.
looks like it's outer.
So they're plywood? As opposed to boards?
So if we can get clarification on that as well.
Yeah. Because it looks like it's pointing to something else than what's really on the outside clad.
It could be a top detail too.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've talked about the lighting. The design of lighting. Any questions, any comments on that?
No, just my previous comments that they're
Right.
legal according to our current specifications.
Okay, any other questions on these sheets?
Nope.
Um, So, any other questions from the board at this time?
Oh, just clarification. The process on the sending out to abutters, were all abutters confirmed that they were notified? How did you do that?
Did you notify?
You know, the
butter?
butter list goes
We
out
get from
from
the
the
assessors.
town office, right? Because
You got the
we-
bu-
yeah,
from the
so they-
assessors.
we pay the fee, and
Oh.
there's a list of it, and everybody
So we'll
gets
confirm.
sent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure everybody confirmed they received it.
All right. We'll open it up for questions from the public. Anybody in the audience have any questions for the applicant? Any comments? If you'd like to be recognized, please go to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon, my name is Paul Doan. I'm a resident of the town of Harwich on Main Street. And I do have some questions on this process, and I hesitate to challenge my former colleague in the great and general court, but I must admit that I am having trouble with this application as it's presented. But first, I labor with the difficulty of not knowing what the current scheme or plan is. I have a set of plans that I thought were relatively current, but I don't know that they're the most current, so I'm working from a little bit of a disadvantage here in terms of my comments. But first, as a historic commission, We depend on you as a resident of the town to try to preserve as best as possible the historic standards of the town, particularly that section of the town, the village of Harwich Center. If I'm looking at this correctly, this is a 4,500 square foot building that is being proposed, which is clearly outside of any standards of historical sensitivity to the other buildings that are in the village. So we're looking at a huge structure compared to generally, let's say, the Greek Revival features that dominate in this area. And I would call upon you to sort of say, is the scale of this project realistic? Is there a need for a 4,500 square foot convenience store in the historic district? And can it even be made historically compatible? Which I would argue it can't be. Yes, we can make the downspouts wood, or we can do some window dressing, rearrange some deck chairs on the Titanic here, but we're not really addressing a major problem, which is it's changing the nature of the village. To put a 4,500, I can't say for certain, but I question, for example, the convenience store in Harwich Port, which kind of gets blended in a much bigger context of the community there. But is this roughly the same scale as the Cumberland Farms store in Harwich Port? Is it bigger than the Cumberland Farms store? Does Harwich Center need a structure of this amount? And as a historic commission, I would hope, I don't know, but I would hope that you have the authority to say a no to this project, because it's just too large. It's out of scale with historic context. A few points that have me somewhat alarmed. One is, it shows no contours in any of the plan that I'm looking at. And when you walk that site, if you walk back, let's say 70 or 80 feet, which is the dimensions of just the building itself, you're already at the edge, literally at the edge of where the property drops off dramatically. This is not demonstrated here. It's it looks like it's a flat lot with a building and parking around the side and in back. If this really is true, then somebody's going to have to construct a bulkhead of, I would say, 12 feet to the back of the property to get this back lot flat as it's demonstrated on this plan. And then what does that do to the property next to them? There's parking behind the building next to them. Is there going to be a huge wall that makes the parking for this building elevated up to a level with the street? Or is this parking to be lower and therefore level with the property next to it? I don't know. It looks like I can't tell what it looks like. I can't tell whether it's a case of the property has been, the contour has been maintained and this will be at a lower level. If that's the case, then these sidewalks make no sense. I have no, so that I think is a serious concern as to how this is going to be done. Is this whole back lot going to be filled? The town needs parking. There's a huge opportunity for the town to have parking that literally runs from the former post office, or the aquatics building or whatever it is back there, all the way through. It contains the Christie's parking, and the parking potentially could go right on through to the church parking lot behind this building, behind the Ruggies building, behind the tile store building, and behind Red's. We're going to lose that opportunity if somehow this is going to be elevated to a level equal with the front portion of the property. So I think in terms of the long-term prospects and opportunities that the town has, one thing that it has to consider is the parking. If we can get it off the street or provide public parking behind the buildings, as this is generally allowing for here, I think it makes more sense. But the way they've configured it here, it looks like that potential for parking from east to west, one sort of half lot removed from the front street, is lost because of an apparent effort by these folks to come in with a lot of fill and make this parking lot level with the building. And I can't imagine what that does to the parking lot behind Ruggies. Just walk back there and you'll see that you'd have to build some massive wall to hold in the sand or fill, let alone the weight of the asphalt. I assume this is a paved parking lot. That has me concerned, needless to say, and I think as a commission, it requires more consideration. At least a plan that shows the contours, I think, is certainly in order. I won't dwell any more on that point. The size of the building, I think, needs to be questioned, and I think the property owner or the applicant should be encouraged to think of something with a smaller scale. When I look at the building itself, I'm puzzled. This building is not historic in any sense. I don't care how you want to frame it. It's a building that's out of proportion with the historic buildings in the town. And this would change the whole nature of the center of the town. Things that bother me are, it's a 6/12 pitch, according to the plan I'm looking at. 6/12 is about as unattractive and incompatible with the Greek revival structures as you could possibly imagine. It's got to be at least 10/12, and I would, while the drawing looks like it's 10/12, I question whether it's 6/12 in this drawing. Secondly, the building in the front, from the front of the building, I assume that's 6/12, but when you look at the building itself, the roof line is practically going straight up, which is not 6/12, and I don't know how that's going to work in terms of the proportion of the dormers that is shown in the plan I'm looking at.
So, Mr. Doan, what's the date on the right-hand corner?
I don't have a date. That's another thing.
So, you've got an older set of plans. So why don't, if you'd like to step forward, I can let you take a look at these. We've been through multiple iterations of these plans. So I have a,
Well, I've got, kind of a disadvantage that the public is put at when the public doesn't get to see any recent set of plans. Okay, so now it is 12/12? That has been changed?
if you'd like to come forward, the applicant has their set of plans right up here, if you'd like to come take a look at them. And then you can step back and comment.
Are they, do you have it saying 10/9/2018 under the blue signature?
You know, you need to understand that this is probably our sixth hearing with,
Bob's
with
here,
them, so
it's
we've had
probably-
multiple
This is
iterations.
probably current, not what I was looking at.
to
This is the
August.
plan that I had that I thought was the most recent. 10, 10, 10, 10, 9.
Most current, right?
Okay. Well, so strike my questions about that. I realize I'm operating with a older set of plans, and I'd have to go back and look at these. Let me just make a few other comments that kind of concern me. One is, which a member of your committee raised, the faux windows, all they're going to end up with are fly catchers. They're going to be out in the front or be visible, and all the public is going to see is a lot of dead flies behind the window. I can guarantee that. The store owner is going to see a nice display on his side because he doesn't even see the outside. That brings me to a more sensitive point, which is what I said before. I don't know how many times I've asked somebody from inside the building, could you just go out and empty the wastebasket or the basket that's overflowing by the front door of their building? So the people on the inside rarely know what the people on the outside are really looking at, and faux windows are going to be fly catchers. I really, I guess we'll have to look at the plan. I was worried about the west side of the building. I didn't see any sense of what that was to look at, and whether people would actually walk from the parking lot along the west side of the building to enter the north side of the building, or if anybody is being encouraged to walk along the west side, which is putting in a sidewalk there. Is there any access from the west into the building? If you have to walk around to the north and enter from the front door, or go around to the east, why have more pavement? Why have more unattractive, I guess, I'd rather just see that fully landscaped. I'll end my comments at that, I guess, without, one final point is, it kind of has me concerned, the cupola. I'm intrigued by the fact that it says we're going to have up there in the cupola a 100 watt, I don't know why we have to stipulate it's 100 watt, but maybe that's in compliance with the regulations of bylaws. A 100 watt elevation fixture below the glass elevation. So it appears as though the cupola is going to be fully lighted, kind of like the John Hancock building. Maybe it'll change colors depending on the weather, I don't know. But it's going to have a light in this. Now, how long do you think that 100 watt bulb is going to last? When the bulb goes out, how is it possible to even get up there to change it? Is that a feature that we want to have, a lighted cupola up there? If we do, then I don't think it looks good, it'll last for maybe a year or two, then it goes out and the cupola's there. Maybe you don't want it lighted, but I never kind of got the sense of what we have to dwell on, whether it's a 100 watt light bulb that to me is like, in the 1880s, there weren't 100 watt light bulbs lighting cupolas. And to me, again, we're varying from the whole historic nature of the building. Put a cupola up there, but we don't need it lighted, because I can guarantee you it's only lighted until the bulb goes out, and then no one can replace it. Bob, thanks for your copy of the plans. I'll respectfully conclude my comments.
Thank you. I would encourage you to go to the historic office, and they will have this set of plans is on file, and there will be, I'm sure, revisions after today's meeting, so prior to the next. Okay? Anyone else that would like to make a comment?
Greg Winston. I wasn't aware that there was a more recent plan than the plan that I've been looking at, which is the same plan that Paul Doan's been looking at. And at the time, there were the south elevation, that would be the back side of the building. We had no plans, or the building department didn't have any plans a week ago. So I wasn't aware of how that was going to be developed. And I'm still not aware, obviously, because if you people have that plan, it wasn't available to the public. So I'm concerned as well about the topography. I'm concerned about the rear elevation. But Mr. Doan brought up something that's vitally concerning me, and that is the easement or access between these two properties, because as you well know, having studied it, and I think you've done a very good job, you know that the proximity of the new parking lot and the proximity of the existing parking lot are very close, but there's a change in elevation. And I think that it would be ludicrous to believe that someone had bought eggs here and would walk back to the sidewalk and around and down again to buy a bottle of vodka over there. They're going to cut through. And this is evident as it exists today, because the original site plan showed the existing structure. On the west side, I think there were developed 4 parking spaces that were never actually developed, paved, lined. And then there was supposed to be a very large green space, which is now a mud lot that people park on sideways and helter-skelter all the time. Understanding, of course, this isn't really the purview always completely of the HDHC. It is the purview of the planning board, and I understand that the planning board hasn't yet seen this or had a hearing on this plan. But I think it's important, and I think that you've gone into depth discussing lighting and landscaping and so forth and so on. But I think that this issue here, that could very easily just become one great big muddy mess between 2 buildings, and basically you're just having 2 parking lots back to back with the muddy mess in between. That's very important moving forward. I agree with a lot of what Mr. Doan has to say, but I think that particularly the topography and the fact that none of the elevations that we have or that we've been able to get a hold of yet have shown the topography relative to that elevation. And that would be very concerning for me or any neighbor on Parallel Street if it were to be filled, as someone had said. I personally am just concerned about the village and how the village is developed. I'm very, very much in favor of business, and I don't want to go down as being opposed to business. But I think that it has to be appropriate to the historic nature of the town. I thank you all very much for the discriminating work that you've done on this plan. Thank you.
Anyone else with any comments? Mr. Bradley.
Having listened to the last 2 speakers, there's not much I can add to that. So I'm not going to reiterate everything. I just happened to read Mr. Antonellis' letter that came in today, apparently, and I'd like to point it out to the commission. There's one very short sentence on the 3rd paragraph, I think, that says simply, size and shape matter. And that's very true in this case. The volume of the building has not been addressed. I don't think the project is too large. Unlike Paul Doan, I think the project is not handled properly. And the building should have a 2nd floor on it. If you think about the structures along the street, particularly what we call the 3 Sisters, this one violates that entirely, and I think that should be reconsidered, which means practically a new design for the whole thing. I'm also very irritated by the little corner doorways that are supposed to go upstairs. I don't think that makes those apartments commercially viable. I don't see why someone would go into a doorway like that to go up to a an apartment, which is probably going to cost them in the range of, I don't know, $1,500 a month or something. The topography is just not presented to us yet. We have almost no idea of what that's going to do to the neighbors, and particularly to the parallel street people. I think they're going to be very damaged by it. There's almost a 12-foot differential between the land underneath the current building and the abutting properties on the south. And if you raise that land up 12 feet or say 10 feet or whatever it's going to be, you still have a huge problem with the relationship of where you drop that property, where you drop the land. And you're going to have some sort of wall system or bulwarks or something to handle that. And on top of that, they indicate three light standards along that strip, which would be 16 feet high. So you're talking of a difference of about 28 feet. And we're going to have a very detrimental effect on those residences. And they're all residences along that strip. I don't think we should let that happen to them. I don't think it's appropriate to the town, and it's certainly not historically viable. The commission's been hearing this now for about 3 months or so, and I don't think it's, my suggestion would be to reject the project outright. And perhaps the commission could, even if they have to, could in the report, make a report or do something that would help the applicant redesign the project and come back. To drag it on with extensions, I think is, it's a little bit, well, it's not productive. And I think it should be, in my opinion, I think at this point, enough has been said that there are enough problems with the presentation to reject it in its entirety. All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that has any questions or comments to make at the public hearing? Hearing none, I will read Mr. Antonellis' letter into the record. This is from Susan Cedar and Peter Antonellis, 100 Parallel Street, Harwich, Mass. It's dated October 25th and was delivered by hand and received in the building department yesterday. It's addressed relative to the application for certificate of appropriateness, HH 18-09, 711 Main Street, map 41, parcel D-8, applicant Samuel Patel. Dear Chairman and Commission members, as we are unable to attend the public hearing that is rescheduled for Friday, 10/26/18, we are writing to urge the Harwich Historic District and Historical Commission to reject the application for new construction at 711 Main Street. The proposed development is incongruous to the historic aspects and the architectural characteristics of the surroundings and of the historic district. The size and shape of the proposed building is not appropriate in relation to the buildings and structures in the vicinity. Perceptually, the Main Street Historic District is comprised of houses built in the 1800s, juxtaposed with commercial buildings built mid-century, such as the former post office and drugstore. The proposed building is similar in size and architecture to only one other building in the historic district, the current Main Street Market at 715 Main Street, a commercial building built in 1989 that itself is incongruous with the rest of the historic district in size, shape, and architectural features. The Main Street Market building is the one building in the historic district that looks like it really belongs in East Harwich. Your approval of a similar building next door at 711 Main Street will significantly detract from the visual character of the historic district, not enhance or complement it. Size matter and shape matter. The proposed building would be about 3 times the size of our house that abuts 711 Main Street to the south. It would be more than twice the size of the building adjacent to the west, Ruggies Restaurant, and it would be about 3 times the size of the house directly across Main Street to the north. To be fair, there are several very large buildings elsewhere in the historic district, but unlike the proposed development, these buildings are camouflaged with regard to size because their design is such that they appear a collection of smaller buildings. For example, the apartment complex at 718 Main Street is over 16,000 square feet, but has the appearance of a series of much smaller buildings. Likewise, the Royal on Bank Street and Town Hall are both large buildings, but with older historic proportions fronting the street and larger architecturally varied additions to the rear. The size of these buildings is less stark and dominant than we imagine the proposed single-box design sitting amidst a paved parking lot at 711 Main Street would be. The Winstead Inn at 114 Parallel Street is similar in size to the proposed development, but again, because this property appears as a series of connected and architecturally varied buildings, its size does not overwhelm smaller buildings nearby. This is true of the Brooks Library as well. We also have this additional concern. The applicant's proposed design plan does not show the current topography of the land and is considered, does not show that the current topography of the land is considered or accommodated. The front third of 711 Main Street land parcel sits a full story higher than the rear two-thirds of the lot. The Ruggies building next door accommodates this topography with essentially a walkout basement, i.e. the building is 2 stories on the street but 3 in the rear, with the parking lot behind the building well below street level. Does this applicant propose to fill in and level their lot? Will we see berms, retaining walls, and other forms of erosion control? Could not some part of the square box design that the applicant now proposes be narrowed, elongated, or heightened to conform with the topography and the character of nearby historically significant buildings? In closing, we urge the Commission to reject the current application. While the proposed building may be attractive to some, we believe its design truly fails to fit in with or complement or pay homage to the historic preservation of Harwich Center. A vote against will protect the historic district. A vote to approve it will diminish it. Thank you for your consideration. Respectfully, Susan Cedar and Peter Antonellis. And they reside, as I stated, at 100 Parallel Street in Harwich. Any other comments from members of the public? Hearing none, please.
Just in sort of closing and wrapping up, I'd like to speak to a couple of points that have been made. I can assure you that our architect has been on the site. He realizes the topography of the lot, excuse me, and he realizes that he's going to have to produce this plan, and he realizes he's going to have to produce drainage plans, and he's well aware of some of the challenges, and he's assured us that there's not going to be a problem in that respect. Although I'm perhaps prejudiced because I'm the attorney here, I do want to point out for the first 29 years of my life, I lived on Parallel Street. And I have strong ties to this town, and I believe that we do want to produce something that's worthwhile, is going to be there for a while, going to be attractive. And I can, as you know, we've worked with this commission to try to accommodate, and we continue to, and I think that this is a good project. We're going to make the corrections, and I just want to briefly talk about them. The downspout will be in detail. We're going to show a sprinkler system for the landscape. The doors to the second floor for the apartments will be off the corners. There will be no faux window in the front left-hand corner as you face the building from Main Street. There'll be architectural clarifications of the columns on the outside, and we'll make sure that the lights are legal according to code, although that may not be one of your purviews. But in any event, we hope to meet you again.
Just comment.
Yeah.
Also the faux windows in the dormers,
In the dormers as well.
besides the downstairs.
Well, they're not going to be, I mean, they're going to be windows. There's not going to be anything behind them, so they won't be faux, it won't be
Well,
faux.
But
it
it
says
has-
it
They're
on the
detailed as faux dormers on the
Also,
plan.
we'll strike the faux because there'll be nothing, there won't be anything behind them. Okay, it will not be faux dormers, windows.
I would like to add a clarification on the window on the first floor, that it shouldn't be blocked, that you
that's
should be able to see through it.
Right, yes. That's my intention.
Okay, so, it's the intention of the board.
May I make another comment?
You may make another comment.
I
Yes, you
mean,
may.
I do appreciate the issue with the topology. Unfortunately, today was the first day I actually walked over there and did not realize the scope of how deep that is back there, and the fact that it's radically going to change that back area. I didn't expect it to be that much. I just didn't imagine it was that different. And I think it will make a major change in the back.
Well, it's going to be gradual from the back, so it's not going to, it's going to take off some of that. But yes, there's going to have to be significant fill back there.
Right. That's why I had asked about the, whether that was the actual neighbor's lines on
Yes.
the thing.
Yes.
And there's not much room for gradual thing there. It's going to be pretty radical, or it's going to be not, and you're going to have some kind of retaining wall or push sand right up to his property line.
I think it's going to work. I see your concerns.
And I mean, you would have to have, on the Ruggie side, you would have to have literally about a 10 to 12-foot retaining wall. I don't think you can, based on the plans, I don't see a slope there.
I can't speak to that, but I hope to have the architect here so that he'll be able to address some of that.
Any,
Well, that was one of my concerns as well, especially as Mr. Doan was commenting on what would be visual from the back and the side. Is there some way that we can see a plan that would show us what that would look like? I mean, all we have really is a flat surface, and we see it sitting nicely on a flat lot, but is there any way that we could see what's proposed as far as, if it is a retaining wall, what would that be made of? What would it look like? How would it, I don't know.
so, Gail, from my perspective, and to the applicants, that would be required, because anything that's built on this parcel, we're gonna see from the street, so.
Right.
So we
So
would need to see
we
that
should see that.
before.
So I would have that added.
Okay?
Okay. Our next official meeting is the third Wednesday in November. So,
May I ask a question? Is there any consideration to work with the neighbors to come up maybe with an alternate plan to address that back area? I mean, the building size, I got mixed. I do think I like larger, but I don't like a big block either. I'm not wild about that. Because that's actually 2 house lots. There were 2, if you recall. There was the gas station and another house in that area. So that, you know, it can accommodate 2 separate buildings very easily. Not that I'm suggesting necessarily that, but, you know, I think there's definitely a lot of concerns with the neighbors about this project. And I'm kind of concerned about that.
Well, I'd have to talk to my clients. However, I have Mr. Doan's number. I could call him.
And I think
Also,
maybe you should,
also Mr. Winston.
well, and I think maybe
And
even
Mr.
Mr.
Bradley?
Antonellis,
Yeah,
Mr.
sure.
Everybody around there. And I don't know if you've had any contact with the owner
We
of
have not,
Ruggies.
have not.
And, because I don't know if they even know of this, or, I mean, I know they know of it, but I don't know if they've had any input yet.
And maybe don't realize what
The
that.
impact.
Right, what the impact would be.
may want to do
Can-
that before the next meeting?
May I make a, is it possible to deny this application and then ask them to resubmit it, at least then, so the other members can weigh in on this? You know, I feel very bad that only 4 people are making a decision on this.
They can certainly weigh in on it. They can't vote, that's all. I would,
But still, a vote,
I would-
still a vote is
yeah,
the important thing.
I would say that maybe that's, unless you really think it's important, I'm not sure that we would favor that.
The board has the ability to take a yes or no vote. But a vote would, any votes are going to require 4 of us.
Right.
And the applicant has the option of withdrawing the application and requesting that we do it without prejudice. So,
And if they resubmitted, would the whole board be able to then be involved?
it would be a new application, and then it would be, they would be required to go through the whole application process all over again with new notices, and it would be a new public hearing. So presumably, yes,
Bob, I think
but
we
still
can,
subject to the same issues.
I think we can cover the problems with where we are.
What's the pleasure of the board at this time? I would suggest that we've thrown a little bit more at them today than I think they probably need the opportunity to speak as well. If we can continue to the third Wednesday in November, and they may make some decisions before then. But the chair will entertain whatever motion.
Can we make that so that if, like a 45 days, up to 45 days, so that if there's a failure to have a quorum, because that's the other problem.
We need-
It's not, it's very tenuous.
So we can continue to a date certain that the applicant is, if the applicant agrees to it.
Right.
So if there's we could do 35, we can do 40, 45 if the applicant is agreeable to a date. I don't know what your timeline is, but we're saying the third Wednesday in November is, actually, it's the day before Thanksgiving.
That's
so
not gonna work.
probably
That's
not.
definitely not gonna work.
Probably not the best idea. The 14th is coming up awfully quick.
I can't do the 14th.
The 28th is the week after. December 5th is the next.
I kind of like the idea of being able to have more people vote. I mean, it is tenuous that one of us can't be here.
That's
can't
our
take a
response.
vote.
I'm going to say, as chair of the board, to me, that's our responsibility.
Right.
So we deal with the applications in front of us, and I don't necessarily think that is the reason this board should take a no vote.
Right.
So I'll just put that out there as my 2 cents. We have a responsibility to either approve or deny a project based on the facts in front of us. So I can appreciate the want to have others involved, but we have 2 others. Mr. Bradley is still going to be required to recuse himself, so.
Right. But just on that note, Jean, our new members, or not so new and newer, members have the right to give whatever
Question,
input.
comment, and
that
exactly.
is, I think, something that we should encourage, so that when the vote is taken, it's based on as much information as we can gather.
So let's talk about next steps. A December 5th to me looks like a smart date.
Okay.
If we can confirm that we're available for,
December 5th?
December 5th is a Wednesday.
That's only 2 ways. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's, not November 5th.
I'm good.
Is that agreeable to your client on the
Yes.
5th?
That works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to December 5th at 6 PM.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion made by Gail. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jean? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any in opposition? So that motion carries 4-0. So we will circulate the letter, and if you can get us revised plans as soon as possible. And I would suggest at least a week prior to the meeting, so that
Absolutely.
so that the neighbors, hopefully you'll be in touch with the neighbors, but hopefully they'll be able to come up to the building department and look at the newest issuance of the plans.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next matter on the agenda is another continuation. It is, we're going to reopen HH 2018-19. It's a notice of intent which has been received for 20 Davis Lane, map 8, parcel N2-0 in the R-L zone.
Did you get all
The
that?
application proposes the 100% demolition of a single-family dwelling. The application is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40C, Section 6, and the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 131, Historic Preservation, Article 2. Paul Vassal, owner applicant, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good, yeah, we've turned into evening.
Oh,
We went from afternoon to
No,
evening.
At least it's Friday.
Yeah.
Actually, that's 6 o'clock, right, evening?
Yes.
Is that
We're
right?
close.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, I'm Attorney William Kroll. Paul asked me to accompany him on this hearing,
Thank you, Mr. Kroll.
this continuance. Wait for Mr. Bradley. How are you? Good, thank you, sir. Does the board have a record of who the members were at the previous hearing on this matter?
I don't have it in front of me, Mr. Kroll, and I should have. Let me see. I have
I think
minutes.
it's all of us except for Brendan, yeah.
I think you are correct.
Yeah,
I think that's-
I was here.
I have the minutes. Was it the 28th of August?
No, it's September,
No.
right?
It was later than that. 21st of September.
So that would
September
be
19th?
6 members?
I'm just trying to look here.
Yes. September 19th,
The 19th?
September 19th?
September 21st in front of me.
Yeah, but my name didn't make it on the top. Just pull the other September one, 26th.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. Where is it? Should be way at the back. Yes, it was the 19th, thank you. And yes, it is myself, Gail, Bob Bradley, and Jean. Mr. Lowney was not yet a member of the board, and Mrs. Eldridge was not present.
When?
For September 19th, were you present?
Right, I was.
You were present for that one?
Yeah, because my name's also, I seconded.
Okay,
My
you
name
were
just
there.
didn't make it on the front page.
Then I'm reading,
So all 6 were present?
6 were present.
So, if we have a vote this evening, we need 4 out of the 6?
Correct. Correct. 4 for passage.
So, Mr. Vassal was here at the prior hearing, and I was not. I just wanted to review the elements very briefly of your requirements in terms of determining historical significance on a request for demolition.
Please do.
We acknowledge that the property is listed in the historic register. The town assessing records say it was constructed somewhere around 1750, which means it's more than 250 years old. We're not aware of any historically noteworthy persons or events that are connected with this building, with this residence, nor are we aware of any political, cultural, economic, or social history connections between this property and the town of Harwich. We're not aware of any particular architectural value or significance with regard to the method of construction, or the materials used, or the architectural style, or the period when it was built. I'm sure that the board has its opinions regarding that, but we're not aware of any aspects of that nature. And I'm assuming that the board has a copy of the coastal engineering report, that everybody has a copy of that? And I'll get to that in a moment, but it does state that the structure is kind of an amalgam of several additions that have been put on at various dates. We are, as I was a month ago before this board, have a situation where we have a very dilapidated structure. The coastal engineering report outlines the interior of the structure, the room, the floor layout, but the basic observation is the house is in a serious state of disrepair, and he outlines moisture and water damage pervasive throughout the interior. Mold is widespread on all the properties, on the entire property, necessitating the use of a respirator for safe entry. Collapse of ceiling tiles and ceiling finish work is widespread. All wall coverings are destroyed. Baseboard heaters are rusted. Floorboards have buckled. Window glass is broken. Window casings severely deteriorated. Serious structural issues exist. Rotted sections on the sill. The back of the house, the exterior wall has separated from the roof, resulting in a gap through which daylight can be seen from the inside. The house has 3 exterior columns, each of which is either broken, buckled, or shifted. And at least one exterior dormer is deformed and has a buckled shape on the north side. And I'm hoping that members of the board have driven by, gotten out, walked around, and seen the state of disrepair. I know that the previous, Paul Vassal bought the property from an estate. I handled that estate. We had to have it appraised. The appraiser told me, said, I'm not going on the second floor. It's too dangerous to go on the second floor. I'm not going. So that's why this engineer says it's a visual inspection, and some of the symptoms of structural distress are present but could not be fully vetted. So this report was not available last time, and I'm hoping that the board was saying, give us something to go on here, give us a report so we have some detail on which to make a decision. He says, essentially all exterior wood surfaces require replacement. Trim boards are rotted, shingles are rotted. The small entry porch on the front is separating from the house. Roof line is sagging, roof planks sagging in local areas of the roof. So his conclusion is overall the existing structure is in poor condition with multiple levels of failed building systems. But then he modifies that and says, the list of existing problems is long and significant, however, it's not exhaustive. It goes on as far as what he ran into. All the heating equipment, electrical systems, air conditioning equipment, windows, cabinets, appliances, roofing materials. Perhaps most importantly, structural issues not yet known due to inaccessibility. It's a crawl space. Nobody's going to go upstairs. He says it's a life safety issue. Just mold remediation alone would be extremely costly and difficult. So his conclusion is strong consideration should be given to demolishing the structure to prevent its continued deterioration. In its present condition, the building is a health and safety hazard and should not be used. With no action, structural issues will become more pronounced and collapse will become the primary concern. My client just bought this property beginning of summer, I believe.
Yes.
So if the thought is demolition by neglect, it wasn't him. I don't see how it is economically feasible for Mr. Vassal to restore that property. And I want to point out that the new spectacular house right on Witchmere, at the crest of the hill, Witchmere Harbor Club, just sold a couple of weeks ago. And this house is within, according to Paul's calculations, within 50 yards of that house. And if you read the deed, that house sold for $8,300,000. And this house is within 50 yards of that. I would think the neighborhood would applaud when this house gets demolished. If this, with all due respect, if this house doesn't meet your criteria for needing demolition, I don't have a house that I could bring in front of you that isn't already collapsed and on the ground. Because it's just, you saw the pictures that are, I assume that are part of the petition, that the interior is falling apart as well. And it's just, who knows how it got to this stage, but you can argue, well, we should preserve a house that's over 250 years old. You know, it's historic, and it's, in our day and age, ancient, but it's over 250 years old. It's had it. It's reached obsolescence. It's reached dilapidation and to the point where it's a public nuisance, safety hazard. I speculate that because there were, before Paul bought it, when you went inside, from what I'm told, beer cans, things like that, adolescents, neighborhood kids getting in, having parties, it's an attractive nuisance in the law. That's a legal term. It's not an attractive building, but it's drawing people in, and people can get hurt. When I went and walked the grounds, it was either a large rabbit or a large rat that went underneath. And this is in the neighborhood of multi-million-dollar houses. So Paul has come to you a month or so ago. He said he wanted to continue it. He's come back with a detailed engineering report, and he's asking that you make a determination of non-significance and allow him to proceed to demolish the house, which he assumed that he would be able to do pretty much with no question when he bought it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get started, if anyone on the board needs to see the pictures inside, we do have the file with the
I would like to see them.
colored pictures. There you go.
I got 'em right here.
You got them, Julie?
Yeah, from the last meeting.
Anyone else?
I got 'em.
So, any questions from members of the board?
Yes.
Mr. Doan?
Yeah, and looking at the engineering report, it doesn't seem to separate the problems between the two structures. I mean, you have the original 1750 structure, then you have everything afterwards. I didn't walk around the whole building. I just stopped and looked at the front and the side. And it seemed to me that the newer construction, the back is the worst, but obviously I wasn't gonna go inside or anything without permission.
As opposed to the front,
The front.
Closest to the road?
Yes, the front closest to the road is the original house. That is the architecturally significant piece of the property. The rest of it is not, in my opinion. So, but the front building is. I tried to look, I didn't see from the front any roof collapsing or anything on that part of the building. The porch is separated. I don't think the porch is even original to the front. I'm sure it's not. that was added sometime later. So,
Paul can address that question about the front building
Okay.
if you'd like.
yeah.
So
go
to
ahead.
your comments, Mr. Doan, the back of the house and the two side sun porches are, I assume, the newer structure?
Yeah.
Technically, I go by the chimney, which is in the middle of the house, so that, however old that is, which is also, I'm surprised he didn't mention it, but all the grout's gone. I mean, that thing is, that's all done as well. But all the pictures that you have, we didn't go back into the back of the house. That's kind of the more dangerous part, so all the destruction and deterioration you see is in the front of that house. The other thing I would like to add that the engineer pointed out, and he put it in, on the dormers, but if you look at the walls from straight ahead, I'm talking about the exterior walls.
Yeah.
You know, they still have some of the architectural features that we discussed in last meeting, but if you look at the side, from a side view, you can see the buckling of the boards underneath, and that to us is just not repairable and salvageable.
I know we originally, from the last meeting, we were going to arrange a tour, or so we all could get together. That never happened, did it?
As far as I know, I offered up a bunch of dates, and I was
We
happy.
did. Did you folks not get emails?
No.
No, I didn't.
No.
Okay.
You're probably safer for
Well-
not getting those.
And, you know, I don't necessarily disagree with that.
I walked
But no.
around with trepidation.
We did, he did send us, he did send us dates, and we circulated an email, and you folks never.
No.
That was
sorry.
Because I was very anxious to see it.
I don't think,
Okay.
I don't think you would have gone inside
Not
because
have gone
you
inside.
need a mask and all of that, but,
And that was the email that was
Yeah.
communicated. Okay, my apologies
No.
to the applicant as well, because I had circulated that, and I thought that was something that folks had reached out individually. Okay. That being
But
said,
the front of the original building, you say, is all warped, the walls and everything?
Absolutely, and the interior of those walls, you know, either covered in mold or not there due to the water damage. So all of the infrastructure behind those walls is completely destroyed as well, mostly due to water damage, and then freezing, and then
Yeah.
thawing and freezing again.
Because the foundation on that front side actually looked in pretty good shape to me.
Until you look at it from the inside.
Okay.
Inside, because it's brick, and then they slather over the facade, you know, at some point, but.
I want to also add that you may recall that Paul was here, Paul and I were both here before you about a year ago
Yeah.
with the schoolhouse
Yeah.
parking lot project. And if you've been by there, he's done an admirable job with the project, and he's had a number of projects around town. So he's not new to the scene.
And if I may, just as additional color to the board, and I might have mentioned this last time, I never thought, I mean, I knew it was a historic house when I bought it from Mr. Miller from the Family Trust, and everybody in that neighborhood has said, awesome, congratulations, because they know the kind of work I do. I had no idea that there would be any question that that house was nothing other than an absolute tear down. It's a shame, but, you know, when someone lets it go for 25-plus years, there's nothing you can do about it in terms of a wet piece of paper, you know?
so I'm just looking at pictures online for the,
What do you think?
there are a couple of pictures for the front of the house. I'm assuming this is from earlier this year when it was sold, so.
Again, the same shot here?
Yes, that one, and there's one a little bit further on, Brendan, there's
Yep.
a couple of additional ones. Mostly they're aerial shots, obviously.
Not a lot of around town. Yeah, it doesn't look bad from the front.
Mhm.
Just for people to see if they haven't had the opportunity to go by.
I have not been by.
I've been down there, but I couldn't get in the
Okay.
day that I went. There was a truck.
So any questions from the board?
The one question I have in regards to, that stood out in the letter from Coastal Engineering is the life safety issue. And I could see from the interior space that just getting in there breathing is an issue. But based on what he's saying, it's going to extend to structural issues as well. life
Absolutely.
safety.
And your name, sir?
It's Brendan Lowney.
Brendan is our newest member of the Historic Commission,
Thank you.
his first official meeting. Any questions from the board? Anyone? Bob? Any questions or comments from people in the audience?
Yes, ma'am.
Please introduce yourself and state your name and address.
My name is Barbara Nickerson. I reside at 37 Bayview Road in Harwich Port. And I guess I'd like to start off saying that I'm very concerned that we continue to lose historic resources in this town, which is why I'm here. You know, we're here today, we're shaped by many things, including our history, our historic buildings. There's an important component of who we are. Our built environment's an important example of the people of this town who built this town. If we continue to demolish our historic structures, we're going to continue to lose more of our past, more of the fabric of this community we call home. As far as I'm concerned, as far as issuing a demo permit, I would hope that you would have allowed that decision to be inclusive of a potential new owner, not an applicant who had purchased the land, now is selling it for a significant more amount of money 2 months later, 3 months later. I'd also like to remind you of a permit you granted 2.5 years ago to restore and remodel my 1796 family house at 617 Route 28. My opinion is that, and Mr. Bradley was there, my opinion is that parts of it were in worse shape than 20 Davis Lane. And yes, 6 or 7 months ago, I did go in 20 Davis Lane before Mr. Vassal purchased it, since I live in the area. And the original house is not in any worse shape than my house was, and it's probably in better shape in many respects. The back part, I agree, that needs to go. I don't consider it to be a nuisance structure. And I also find it kind of quaint that Coastal Engineering, with their report they came out with, they were the engineer of record for my house, for doing all the structural work, et cetera. And they used my house, the work that they did, as an example when they're meeting with other potential clients for the restoration work on old houses. My opinion is that it can be certainly be revitalized and restored to meet current codes and standards. Is it going to be cheap? No, it's not. I can tell you right now it's not, after going through it for the last 2 years. But the point is that it can be saved, it can be redone. Now, my other concern is that, you know, the house right there on Snow Witten, it's over $8.3 million, 150 yards away. So is Mr. Vassal's house. He's watched this house go down the tubes for the last 10 or 15 years also. And everybody on Davis Lane, I own a piece of property on Davis Lane, and not everybody's thrilled with the fact that we're going to be tearing this down. If you look at the George Rockwood house next door that just sold this past February area, 1780, 1770, somewhere in that time frame, you can see what a beautiful home this other house can be restored to. So, as far as the reports from Coastal Engineering, the professional engineer has certain guidelines that they have to report to, that they have to adhere to. But my opinion is that if you got a good contractor out there, he can tell you what can and can't be done for that particular property. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other questions from the board?
What would be the feasibility of moving just the front structure?
Impossible, in my opinion, sir. Absolutely impossible. I've built in this town for several years, and I just, everyone's laughed at me when I've offered to do that, or even suggested to my builders. And that's, I have to tell it like it is, sir.
I know I want to take a look at it one more time.
I do too. I didn't, you know, I understand that we didn't get a notice for,
Apparently we did not, even though they made an effort.
He did make an effort, so I mean, I have to say that he did. And I had forwarded an email that apparently did not go through to
I'll double
anything.
check, but I don't recall getting it. Did it come from you?
It came
Okay.
from me. There was an email that had
Okay.
come through from from Elaine. And I had attempted to forward it to all of you, and apparently it didn't go through. So that is on me.
What is Amy's role, in, if I may ask?
So Amy is actually our assistant.
Okay.
She was out of the office for, so Elaine was helping at that point. Elaine
Okay.
was the one that had reached out to you, and that you had spoken to, if I recall. So, Mr. Kroll, for your applicant,
I have a couple of other comments, if I can.
please.
Before I know the property, it has a for sale sign on it, has been marketed as a tear down, but correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, Paul has plans to build a house on it.
Absolutely. And
Himself.
Deirdre Hedmark has been informed of that.
Yeah, so he's not as actively marketing it in that sense, because he plans to tear it down and build a house that would be fitting for the neighborhood. And of course, he lives on Davis Lane, has a house on Davis Lane. With all due respect to Mrs. Nickerson, and I appreciate her comments, and she and her husband have done a fantastic job with those properties on Route 28. And I have no idea of what the cost is, but they've had a lot of people working like bumblebees on those properties for a long time. And I don't know if that's economically feasible for Mr. Vassal.
So I will say this. If your client's amenable, I'm willing to, we could call a special meeting in 2 weeks, if your client's amenable to a continuance, to let people take a walk around, and I would suggest the outside.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Now that we're all here today,
Sure.
I'm disappointed that no one was able to get there. I understand, communication failures happen. I, love my town here. Starting Monday morning, I have an open calendar for the next 2 weeks. If anyone wants to go in there at separate times, I will tell you this, I have insurance waivers. I've been warned by Sullivan Insurance, who's also a Harwich resident, not to let anybody in that house. My neighbors have picked through it, as I found out, which is fine. There's little artifacts in there that people who grew up in the neighborhood feel entitled to, which is fine, and they've told me about it at least, right? But I would ask if it's possible, the sooner the better, to go in and get out of there, and I would like to be there. Like I said, I have an open calendar. I'll accommodate any of you. It doesn't have to be all at the same time, but.
So here is my comment. If there's a quorum of the board, it would need to be posted as a public meeting. So,
Okay. What do you mean? It's better to go separately?
well, it would be better for people to
Oh, the visit is a public meeting.
visit, would be a
Oh, okay.
public hearing.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that.
It would be a public meeting.
If you had
because you'd
more
have-
than 3,
Correct,
so you could do
correct. And I
2
would,
tours or,
and I would suggest there would be no discussion. It would simply be, it would simply be a look.
Yeah.
good idea.
Those would be my cautions to people when they go to take a look.
One other
I'm
item.
trying to think,
I'm sorry.
give me a second, I just want to look at the calendar.
Through Amy, she can get in touch with me anytime.
Okay.
We're at the 24th, so next Wednesday is actually Halloween.
Good time to visit that house.
So, if folks would have time in the next week that wanted to go take a look, I would suggest we could do, I don't know that we want to do the Halloween, but we could do November 1st on a Thursday.
I can't, if it's as a group.
No, I'm saying for a meeting.
For a meeting?
I'm
Another
saying
meeting?
for a meeting to,
If I may, Madam
continue.
Chairman, to visit the property, 3 or less, contact Amy at Town Hall, and she knows how to get a hold of Paul, and the two of them can coordinate your visit. So that's not an issue.
Okay.
The only issue is
I'm just
when's the
looking-
next meeting?
That's exactly,
So-
that's what I'm
So
talking
what
about.
you're saying is arrange for a visit prior to that, whatever the
Correct.
date was, the last one. So,
If Mr. Vassal's telling us he's got availability the next couple of weeks.
Anytime,
Mm.
anytime. This
So
is
when-
extremely important, and I appreciate it.
so if we arrange to get there sometime before, what day did you say? Thursday?
I'd say, well,
The first?
Mr. Jones said he can't do Thursday the
okay.
1st. So what about the
I
next
can't-
week? What
Yeah,
about,
the next,
about the 7th?
I am out of town the next week, but I don't have to be here now because
Okay.
I think you'll have a quorum, right?
We do.
I'll come back Friday.
Can do a Friday. I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. We have to
Yeah,
post a
I'm
meeting,
not
so we have to post the,
The other question I'd like to ask is,
Yep.
I heard some comments of coastal engineering. I literally randomly went through the list that the town had of people who could do this. These are one of the folks, if I need to get another firm, I'll do that as well, but, you know, these folks are really busy. Would that help the board, or is it?
that's your decision as an applicant. Would we have a quorum on November 7th? Which would be the day after Election Day.
currently I'm available.
Anyone?
As long as you can do it like at 4:30 or so.
We can do it earlier if
Sun goes down at 6.
need to.
I can't do it earlier, because I
Oh,
work,
you-
I
you
work
need-
full-time, so I can't.
Oh, so you need
I need
a
it
6
later.
o'clock? So we're typically a 6 o'clock
Oh, okay,
meeting.
that's
This
fine
is
then.
4 because it was
Oh,
Friday.
sure. That's fine.
Is that a Wednesday?
November 7th would be a Wednesday. Day after Election Day, is that amenable to those?
And it would be at 6.
So Brendan's the only one that's technically not, because it's a continued public hearing.
I can make comments.
You can certainly make comments and ask questions,
I can be there, but yes.
But not vote, is that what you're
but
saying?
not vote,
That's
correct?
And Ms. Steiner is not going to be,
I'm out of town that week.
so it would be
1,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Correct. You'd need 4 out of 5. Is that amenable to everyone, or consensus? Mr. Vassal?
I'm a little bit nervous, you know,
Understand.
to be honest with you. Ms. Steiner, I'm sorry, when are you coming, when will you be available after the 7th?
That following week.
Yep.
But not the 14th.
So,
Obviously, it's easier to get 4 out of 6 than it is to get 4 out of 5.
understood.
Yeah, I'm available 13th, 14th, and 15th, certainly.
I'm not.
None of those
I'm,
days.
the 14th, I'm open from Wednesday on.
So the 15th?
I won't be, so the 15th is, that'll be okay.
I could do the 15th.
You can do the 15th.
I can do the 15th.
Everybody else on the 15th.
Day of the
We
week
make
is
it at
that?
6 o'clock.
Thursday.
It's a
Oh, wait,
Thursday.
wait, I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
I can't. I just, I have a conference.
That's
in
all
New
right,
York.
Mr. Doan.
We'll do the 7th if we have to. We'll do the 7th.
What about remoting in, what if we called you on the telephone?
No, that's definitely not possible.
Not possible, okay.
No, for what I'm,
Is the 7th possible on the telephone?
Or Ms.
I could
Steiner?
I could do the telephone on the
Sure.
7th.
All right,
that'd be fine.
Thank you so much.
is that okay? We'll do the 7th then, with the telephone.
No problem.
So I would just ask that you email me your cell phone.
Sure.
Make sure that we go through and we'll get the
So
teleconference set up.
we're back to the 7th.
So we're on the 7th, right?
So we're on the 7th at 6 PM.
And as far as viewing, did you want to try to set up a date that the whole, how much notice do you have to give?
We can't do the whole group.
You don't want to do the whole
No.
group?
We need 48 hours notice to post a public meeting. So, I mean, we can do that if that's the,
Or if 3 of us can go?
And
As I-
with all respect, the house is wide open, and you can go there anytime. I mean,
Yes.
it'd be great if I could be there, but, you know, what you see is what you get there.
Just don't
It's
go
just-
in.
No, it's okay to go in. It's just, don't go up to the 2nd floor.
No.
And not only is it scary, you know, but it's, It's not safe. At the first floor, you should be fine, but the sills are all rotted. The engineering folks showed me that. And a rotted sill is, you know, moisture and termites. So then when you go to lift a house, it becomes an issue in moving stuff around. But, you know, you can peek in there. The front door's open, and typically people go in through the side door. There's like a storm door on there, which is open, and the main door won't shut, so it's just open. And you're going through the kitchen that way, which is fine, so just be careful,
So I will say I
please.
will not be walking into the house.
Okay, well, just be careful
I'll be
regardless.
happy to tell you that.
Okay.
I'm happy to walk around the outside.
We all want to be healthy citizens of the town, so,
Exactly, I understand.
okay.
So with your client's agreement, we will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing till 6 PM on November 7th, which is the Wednesday, which is the day after Election Day. Can I,
So moved.
so Gail made a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition? Hearing none, it's unanimous, so we will continue the public hearing, circulate just a letter confirming. And again, my apologies to you, sir, because
No problem.
my intended email was reach out and go take a visit.
Thank you very much.
It included the.
We've learned in my business, Madam Chairman, to, at the end of the email, say, please confirm.
I certainly will do that.
Thanks again.
Thank you. We are,
Okay, have a great trip. Back to the 7th?
I am.
we are-
I wouldn't miss it.
Thanks again,
I have a correspondence item.
you do have a correspondence. I'm just trying to dig out my,
Am I needed on this one?
I'm sorry?
Am I needed for this one? Because
Is this 22 Central Avenue?
You are
Yes,
not.
it needs a vote.
I got 2 copies.
You are not.
Well, we have a quorum if I go and I don't have.
I'm just looking at my agenda. Yeah, thank you.
It's basically saying it's not 100.
I don't
So
think
we
it's
have
gonna
new
take
business-
long.
So we're okay with that.
You are all set if you need to,
You know that one?
I do.
to vacate the meeting.
And it's new, you think? It's new?
What's this for?
22 Central Ave.
So Mr. Corolla sent us a letter requesting that we review the age of 22 Central Avenue. The assessor's records indicate that it was built in 1935, and yet it was on the list as 1915, I believe. So, as we've done with other applicants, we had informed Mr. Kroll that he could come in on behalf of his client and request that we take a look at the age of the structure and whether it was, in fact, 100 years of age. So, if this board determines the year built is actually correct, then of course we do not have jurisdiction on the home. And if we decide that we disagree, then the applicant will be filing a notice of intent. So,
Is this the list that this was
correct. This
on,
is
is
another,
the one that
correct.
Moran
correct.
together?
So this is the same thing. It's a situation again where our assessor's records show that it was built in 1935.
So she was, but she didn't go back, I don't think, and
She did,
cross-reference
correct.
any actual town
She-
records,
she-
right? She just
correct.
did it on visual, based on visual inspection.
That is my understanding, correct. So we have had this issue before. So, Mr. Kroll has presented us with our assessor's property card, which we have seen with other properties as well. So, questions from the board on the house?
I couldn't tell, I mean, I'm not an architect, I couldn't tell by looking at it. All I could say was that it has that steep pitched roof line that many of them along that street have.
Mr. Doan, thoughts?
I don't have any other reason to
Let me see it here.
think it's other than the 1935.
Yeah, it doesn't look any older.
Anyone else? Mr. Bradley?
No.
Okay. So, that being said, I
If
would
it helps the board, this is a 1910 plate of the campgrounds.
And it's
from
not there.
the Town records, and there was no house there.
All right.
May I
so
see
there
that?
you go.
I'm just nosy
That would
at
be
this
great
point.
to-
On the website.
On the website.
Was it? I didn't look at the file.
That's great.
Yeah, okay.
It did not exist.
Yeah. That's the chair, though.
Did you
So,
want
that being said, Chair would ent-
He believes you.
the chair would entertain a motion to remove the 22 Central from the Town of Harwich Historic 100-Year List, and to make a note that, that we accept 1935 as the date of construction. Somebody make that motion?
I move that we accept the assessor's card that the 22 Central Avenue is 1935, therefore does not fall under the purview of the Harwich Historic Commission.
So Mr. Dona's made a motion, is there a second?
Second. And to remove it from the historic register, or is that a second?
No, that's, what we have the purview to do is remove it from our 100-year list.
Okay.
So we're removing it from our 100-year list and noting that we've established a construction date of 1935.
Thank you.
All right. So Mr. Dona's made the motion, Mr. Bradley's seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any in opposition? So the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll.
What was that, 6-0?
6-0, correct.
Finally.
Are you keeping track?
Well, you got halfway there on the next one, right? At least you got a continuance, you didn't get a denial like the first one.
Leaving on vacation at 7, so I needed some
Oh, jeez.
positive thing to happen before I left.
Like 7 tonight?
7 tonight, yes.
Now you have 45
Yeah,
minutes.
thanks
You have plenty of
for
time.
whipping right through.
Are you taking a plane to California for what's really important tonight?
Where are you going?
That would be nice. No, going to Florida.
Good for you.
Yeah, it should be on a plane to LA, right?
Well, Brendan is.
Well, it might be.
Oh, might be.
So I'm going to make a suggestion to this board based on the fact that we're now at 2 hours and 15 minutes, that we postpone our discussions
Thank you.
on
Night.
Have a nice vacation.
Thank you.
on the application revisions and the meeting schedule. So the zoning board of appeals agenda, is there anything on there that the members want to comment on? I'm going to say no because I don't even see it. There it is. Looks like there is a continuing agenda meeting on the Winstead Inn and Beach Resort. And that is the Braddock Street, so that is not the parallel street. I don't see anything in our historic district. So, if it's the pleasure of the board, we can just accept this and place it on file if nobody has any comments.
Sure.
If we could, I'd suggest if people have an opportunity, take a look at the public hearings and public meeting dates and we can maybe add that to our next agenda on the 7th and take a quick
Yes.
approval, and if there are any changes, we can address that then. I'm going to postpone the meeting minutes as well. We do need to elect a representative from this board to the Community Preservation Commission. Does anyone on the board have any interest? I currently sit on the board. I sit on the board as the member from the Harwich Housing Committee. We do still have our seat available. Joe Powers was our member. We just got all of the applications before us on the 15th they were due. There are currently eight applications. We will start meeting to start reviewing them in the next 2 months. It is a very busy time when we're reviewing applications, as Mr. Bradley can tell you. And it is the town's opportunity to support specifically affordable housing, historic preservation, and open space and recreation projects kind of outside the scope of traditional budget limits, because we have the CPA funds. So
Who's chairing that now?
it is David Nixon, who is the Recreation and Youth Commission's representative. So does anybody willing to come forward and
How often does it meet?
during this time, we can go once a week.
Is there a standard time?
It is generally Thursdays.
Yeah.
It's Thursdays at 6 p.m. and it can be twice a month. It can be every week. Depends on what we need based on the applications. I will say last year we had 16 applications. This year we only have 8.
Really?
But yes, but that being said, some of the 8 are large ones, so we still could easily have 2 to 3 meetings a month, and they are Thursdays at 6 p.m. So I wanted to first gauge people's interest. We have a vacancy that's available. Certainly, I would love to see it filled. I think this board would like to see it filled so that the historic applications have some additional support on them. Any interest from
So
those
you'd
of
be
you?
a historical commission representative.
It's the representative, so you're a full voting member. There's a representative from Real Estate and Open Space. There's a representative from Recreation and Youth. There's a representative from the Housing Authority. There's a representative from the Housing Committee, which is the one I sit on. There's a representative from the Planning Board. There is, and there's also a selectman's appointment.
Is Cindy still it?
No, the selectman's appointment is Chris Rocket now.
Okay.
And I believe there were 2 selectmen's appointments. Another gentleman, John Ketchum, was just appointed as well. So our vacancy right at the moment is historic, so would love to fill it. Open the floor to nominations, or people to nominate themselves if you would like.
Do you know when the next meeting is?
Off the top of my head this week, no, I can't tell you. I think it's November. I don't think we're meeting.
November.
I think it's November, it could be November 8th. I can tell you.
When was the deadline for submission?
It was the 15th of October. We extended it for 2 weeks. And what we did was allow people until December 1st to meet with the other boards and commissions that they may need approvals from or support from. And if they get that information to us by December 1st, then, so for example, if there was a historic application we have requested, as the board has done in the past, that people come before the Historic Commission for support. Now, sometimes it is a historic application that's in our purview, in our normal wheelhouse. Sometimes it's not. But last year, we did have, I think, 8 applications come before us seeking support. So there are a number of ongoing applications, but in addition to that, we're kind of still talking about a CPC plan.
I don't think,
I mean, I'm interested.
Okay?
I was just concerned about that November meeting, because the 15th I'm not available.
All right, let me see.
at 7 PM, so
So it'd be the 8th,
the last meeting was the 18th?
yeah.
Is that right?
So if it's the second Thursday of each month.
Oh, it's at 7 PM, it says.
7 PM.
Mary,
Yeah?
it says 7 PM?
Mm-hmm.
Second Thursday of each month at 7 PM.
Yeah, we meet at 6.
But they meet at 6.
Oh. That'd be
We
the
don't
8th.
meet at 7, we meet at
That'd
6.
be the 8th.
And I believe the 8th is the first.
No, that's the second.
I'm saying,
Thursday.
I'm saying the
Oh,
8th is
first
the first, the next meeting of the
Yep.
board. I'm not sure that I have the list.
If they change the,
No, for CPC.
oh, for CPC.
6 PM. So, I'm trying to see what. So I throw it out there if you're interested. Anybody else have any other interest?
Not right now.
Okay, so would entertain a motion to
Elect Bob?
appoint Mr. Doan to CPC,
Representing the historic.
representing the Historic Commission for this year. When does your Historic Commission appointment?
Oh, I still not got another year anyways,
All right.
so I'm covered for a year.
All right,
anyways.
so we have a motion on the floor to nominate Mr. Doan for our CPC representative. Who's made the motion? Somebody want to make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Julie has made the motion. Jean has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any in opposition?
Abstain?
So we will prepare a letter to the selectmen to get appointed. Now, I will say the most recent trend has been to appoint people in one-year stints. So it will likely be for the 1 year. Well, welcome to the craziness.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I probably don't want more than a year, right?
Do we have anything else on our agendas, folks? Because I don't even know at the moment. Okay, so, any briefings and reports? So I guess I kind of just gave my CPC briefing and report. We have 8 applications. I can give you more detail on them the next meeting. Not much else to report. Planning board obviously hasn't seen 711 Main Street, so that'll come from here to planning board when and if it gets there. So one other thing that I would say has come up at CPC and at planning is we've both been talking about developing comprehensive plans. So to the extent planning board is talking about developing a comprehensive plan, there is certainly room for a historic preservation plan that would be a component part of that. So I would just suggest people think about that. It may be appropriate for us to kind of set up a subcommittee for people to work on a historic preservation plan, much like there is an affordable housing plan and a conservation and open space plan. So I would throw that out there.
Is that in tandem with the group that's working on the commercial plan or
That's a separate,
that's a separate?
right.
For the downtown
The
area?
the center district,
Center
yes.
district, yeah.
That would be completely separate and different from that, but.
Yes, I
Yep.
understand, but it's all being done in tandem, right?
I don't know that it's being done in tandem.
No.
I don't think it is at all. I think it's, I think
That's a
they're,
totally
I
separate.
think it's a totally separate animal.
It's only supposed to be for like a year too, isn't it?
Yeah, they have to be reported back by the end of
Yep.
19,
So,
I think.
any other questions, comments? Again, my apologies. I don't know what happened to that email.
Well, let me check I did see an email from an Elaine Banta. I had no idea who she was.
That would be, so she's. the
Yeah, but
assistant
nobody
to-
else seems to have gotten
I
it,
don't
so.
I don't
remember.
remember.
I'll double check
And
my
I,
email.
I sent an email, like,
But
I'm
that
saying,
email that Elaine sent was something about somebody's chimney.
Oh, that
oh,
was
that was
different.
completely different.
Okay, so
and
that,
that's-
all right.
Yeah, that's completely different and is not
And
part
then
of.
it just like compounded all these different emails on top of it. I was like, oh my gosh.
That was an issue about the turn-in needed to demolish and reconstruct their chimney. And the building inspector determined that it was a like-for-like reconstruction, so it was fine.
Okay.
Didn't have to come to us.
So when you mentioned Elaine's name, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I did see something from her, but I
Yeah,
was
no.
thinking.
No, I actually had forwarded an email from Elaine, but apparently it didn't forward. So, that being said,
I was just
anything
gonna
else?
drive by like after work or something, to that gentleman's house.
It's hard to get,
Is it?
well, you can get down there, but then you have to go down a private road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Davis Lane, it's a more or less dirt
I'll take my
road.
husband
The
with me.
day that I tried to go
Looks like
there
a-
was this huge delivery truck.
It looks like what?
Yeah, that does happen.
I'll go on Halloween, yeah.
Yeah.
Cart paths. Cart paths. Anything else? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Jean has made a motion, Bob Doan has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.